Raven 23 by Gina Keating, How the Department of Justice Betrayed American Heroes. Just finished this one up, wanted to talk about it. This was a tough one to read, and I'll explain a little bit more about that. But first things first, I want to give the backdrop on this a little bit because I think you need to know this before reading, and then also just even the story itself, it's kind of important to know. So when you hear the name Raven 23, that's not going to ring a bell for most people. It's a call sign of a group of guys that were fighting a war. But the backdrop to this all is Iraq and Afghanistan, the wars that we were in for decades. The government contracted with outside companies, right? Contractors, mercenaries, to go help fight our wars. At one point, we even had more contractors fighting the war than military soldiers. Not necessarily in combat, but we just had more contractors over there. And I don't know what that's like today, but that was definitely like it in Iraq and Afghanistan. I've read a lot of books about that. Raven 23 is the story that this was big in the news at the time. This is over a decade ago now, but the media reported that there was an unprovoked civilian shooting by Blackwater employees in Nisour Square in Iraq. And that's kind of the sensationalized story that went out there. And that is the backdrop for what this book is. These four guys were at the core of that story because they were the ones that, quote unquote, unprovoked killed civilians in Iraq. And it became highly politicized because the Iraqi government and the American government at the time were trying to rebuild Iraq. And they wanted to make an example out of these guys because of what they did. And so it became a hot, political hot button story for, at the time, the Democratic government. They wanted to make an example out of these guys. So that's the backdrop for this. A little bit more into the story itself. So Gina herself is a liberal. It's important to mention that because generally speaking, at the time, and even today, truly, conservatives kind of support more the military than Democrats. Not trying to get political here myself. I could care less. I read all kinds of different books, but it's an important backdrop to this because, and she talks about this, as a liberal, she and a journalist, she did not support the war at all. And she was very much against mercenary warriors. And so at the time, her boyfriend is mentioning this story. Hey, the government is trying to put these four guys in jail for what they did, and it's totally unjust. And she just kind of dismisses it. But as a journalist and some of her past instincts, she starts looking into the story more. And the more she digs into this story, which is what the book is about, she realizes the corruption in our government. And that is where the book kind of takes off. She tells the story of these four guys. It's Dustin Heard, Paul Slough, Nick Slatten, and Evan Liberty that fired unprovoked into a crowd of civilians in Iraq. The truth is that what happened is that these guys were part of groups that were over there. They were protecting a diplomat. They were sent on a mission to go out and retrieve. They were a backup team to go out and help protect this person. They were sent out on a mission to go and protect her, and things went crazy as they often did in Iraq. And it's hard to explain. I was not in the military myself. I'm telling you, I've read hundreds of books on this stuff now, whether it's memoirs, all kinds of things. Those combat zones were so chaotic, and you can't understand it if you haven't been in it, myself included, but I've read a lot. When you have ISIS terrorists dressed as civilians, dressed as police officers, dressed as people in the military, planting IEDs, that's just chaos. It puts people into places and war zones that we as civilians cannot understand. And so regardless of what happens there, we can't apply the same set of rules when it comes to laws as we can in a chaotic combat zone. However, if you distort the truth, and is what happened with these guys, and say that, oh, they went out on their own and just started killing people, yeah, of course that's gonna get people fired up in America, really anywhere. But it's totally untrue. And I don't know, I actually resisted reading this book a little bit because I knew what I was gonna find. I've read books like this before. I especially in today's day and age with everything that's going on in the government the last couple of years and really a while. I mean, there's so much corruption at so many levels in the government. They use people as examples, and the ones that bother me the most are when they use veterans. Although these guys were working for Blackwater at the time, they were veterans, they served the country, they were still in service of the country. And to use them as an example and imprison them really bothers me and a lot of people, right? This story became popular. It blew up in the face of a lot of the Democrats at the time, because what ends up happening is these guys get just skewered in the media. There's all kinds of crazy stories. The corruption in courtrooms with the prosecutors is unbelievable. And she details all that in this book, right? You don't take my word for it. Read the book. She details it, and it just feels crazy when you're reading this. This is real life. These people, like, we're going to do this to these veterans. So anyways, these guys all get thrown into jail with crazy terms. At one point, their longest conviction is 30 years for a gun charge. Not the murders, quote unquote, that they committed. It's the gun charge. Just a crazy, wild story. I like I said, hard to read and hard to think about that's the country we live in. So anyways, my thoughts, I have a lot of thoughts on this, but I'll try to keep it concise here. Number one is, when I already talked about this, there's corruption at the highest levels in the government. But when it comes to the political justice or the justice system in general, the problem that we have in this country is judges and prosecutors. The government, the media try to spin this as race wars, and it's amongst ourselves that we have problems. When you have judges and prosecutors that cannot themselves get in trouble for anything ever, regardless of what they say, what's a lie anymore? What is the truth, right? If they can say whatever they want, get away with it, have lifetime terms, what's the truth? What is the law? And you start to read stuff like this more, as I have, and it just gets really distorted, and that part bothers me. The other part of it is these four guys. So they do end up getting pardoned by when the government changes, Trump comes in, and she details all this. They get this groundswell going. Gina herself becomes basically a clarion call for these four guys to help them, even though she's not a Republican, she's not conservative. She wants to help them get out, along with several other people, helps them get out. All four of them, they harbor almost no ill will. And it's just a reminder that there are people out there that just believe in a higher calling, whether it's, they talk about their religion, serving their country. These guys all, and maybe they have their own independent thoughts, their own private thoughts, but they just feel like good old boys, right? They just wanted to help their country, and that's what they felt like they were doing. And so, I don't know, really cool story. I as far as to say who should read it, I think if you're just a person who's into kind of military books, military memoirs, you'll enjoy it. But even if you're just into trying to figure out what the hell's going on with our government these days and the corruption and why people distrust government, it's books like this that you have to read that will open your eyes. Forget the whether you're Democrat, Republican, you agree with the war, don't agree with the war. It should be about justice and truth. And when we are going to skewer guys like this in the media, especially the mainstream media, things like the New York Times have ridiculous headlines about stuff like this. And even after they were pardoned, they continued spinning lies. It's just books like this that will help open your eyes to a lot of this stuff. So that's the book, Raven 23 by Gina Keating. It's the story of these four guys, the Blackwater guys that quote unquote unprovoked killed civilians. You find out, obviously, that was not the truth. Thanks for watching. If you like stuff like this, I do lots of book reviews. Please consider subscribing.